Hello and welcome to the OTB channel. So Linux package management. Well, compared to Windows, Linux package management, on the surface at least, would seem to be much simpler. And yet, for some reason, it continues to create confusion amongst those who are new to Linux, and you only have to dig under the surface slightly to uncover all manner of debates and internal contradictions. So, let's discuss this after the intro. Hello and welcome back. So Linux package management, it's simple, isn't it? There's nothing to it compared to the likes of Windows, where people have to go out onto all sorts of different websites to find the exe packages that they want to download and install. And before that, they even have to go out and search for drivers in the majority of cases. Linux is so much simpler. The vast majority of drivers or modules are baked into the kernel, and even if they're not, in the case of proprietary drivers such as NVIDIA, many distros include simple tools to enable a couple of clicks to install the package. We can go to software stores now on many distros, and it's just a case of searching for the package that you want, hitting a button, and it's installed. You can get your entire system set up in a matter of minutes with the packages that you want, and it's a pain-free process, isn't it? Well, you'd think so. You wouldn't think something like package management could be so controversial and cause so much confusion, and yet it continues to. Windows users coming over to Linux, understandably, know what they've had to do in the past, and they tend to see the whole process of installing a package as a process where you go and find the package, you download it, and then you install it. So they first need to understand that most packages in Linux are in online repositories, and we have tools to manage those online repositories so that you don't have to go out on the web and find the packages. Great idea? Of course it is, and it also means that for the most part we can be more sure about the security and the safety of the packages that we install, especially if we install them from our distribution's repo. It wasn't always like that though. Linux has always been associated with freedom and with choice. And part of that freedom is having access to the source code of many of the packages that we use. And that's where package management, if you could call it that at that stage, started off. People would download the source code, which was usually compressed in a tarball. They would uncompress it. They would run ./configure, which was a script that would run through the system to see if all relevant dependencies were satisfied. As long as they were, it would create a make file and would follow up with make and then make install. So configure, make, and make install. And hey ho, package installed on your system. Well, perhaps not. Because that didn't account for the knotty problem of dependency handling. Many packages and libraries rely on a whole host of other libraries. So you'll often find, if you've ever compiled a package from source, that you have to go off and find out what the dependencies are, and you'll need to compile them first, and they in turn may depend on other packages, and it goes in a big circle, known as dependency hell. But let's assume that dependency hell doesn't happen. You compile a very simple program and you install it through configure, make, install. Well, then you have some additional issues. One, will it work every time you upgrade your kernel? 2, There's no central database recording that package. So how do you manage the different packages on your system? How do you uninstall or upgrade them? It's all possible, but life is a lot harder than we have nowadays. And to ease that process of having to compile everything by source, package managers and package formats evolved. Now, that's not to say that there aren't distros out there who still use source packages. I'm thinking of the likes of Gentoo, and the AUR is essentially using source packages, and Slackware, of course. What has evolved with them is not package managers per se, as we know them today, but build scripts that aid in the installation process. Nevertheless, compiling from source does still tend to be quite a lengthy process if you've got a big program, and it's not always problem-free. And for new people coming across to Linux, it could certainly be off-putting and give the impression that Linux really is a world of geeks that you're not going to survive in unless you're technically competent. So, enter the package format. So in an attempt to make life easier and not force Linux users to compile everything from source, the 1990s saw the emergence of various package formats. The deb file was one of those package formats, which of course is still widely used in Debian, Linux Mint, Ubuntu, etc., and was created by the founder of Debian, Ian Murdoch, who, by the way, named the distribution Debian by using his own name and his then girlfriend, Deborah, hence Deborah Ian, Debian. We also had the RPM package format, the Red Hat package manager, and they have sort of remained as the two most prolific. Although under Arch we have something very similar, which uses the tar.xz format. Now, these are all still archives, but the difference is the archives do not just contain the source code, they contain a pre-compiled binary. And along with that pre-compiled binary, there's also a list of dependencies and metadata such as the name of the package and the package version number. These packages were also introduced in a way that allowed us to link their installation to details in a database. So we could see at any point what package we had installed, and it could easily be removed or upgraded. Of course, the packages themselves needed another tool in order to do that. So we saw the development, along with the package formats, of some low-level package management tools. For deb files, we have dpkg. For RPM files, well, we had RPMs. RPM, the RPM package manager, or the Red Hat package manager, whatever you want to call it. And these were great. These tools were simple command line tools where you could do a whole range of things, but importantly, you could install, upgrade, and remove packages, and a database would reflect what had actually been done. The trouble with these different package formats and low-level package managers was that on its own didn't help to resolve dependencies. dpkg and RPM, if they identify dependencies, do not need or are not able to go out to the internet or out to an online repository and download and install however many dependencies are needed. So the next stage is when we saw the evolution of these higher level package managers. And here I'm thinking of the sort of things that we use today, the likes of apt, the likes of yum, DNF, and so it goes on. There's that many. Zipper, Susie uses Zipper. So these are high-level package managers that allow us not only to install a binary package, but also to go off to an online repository and download any dependencies. Full details are kept in a database, and it becomes simplicity itself to install, upgrade, and remove software packages. So this was great. There are some contradictions and complexities surrounding this, though. It sounds really positive. The trouble was, it would have probably been easier if we just had a single package format, because RPMs weren't necessarily compatible with deb files and vice versa. And what happened was we ended up creating competing package formats that people gravitated towards. And no longer was it just a choice of distro based on what tools did it have included and what was its look and feel. It was about which package manager do you particularly like. Do you like one because it's faster and you think it resolves dependencies better as opposed to another? And there's also the question there of how many additional packages can you install from the online repos and how flexible is it? And strangely enough, people started to become quite loyal to brands. I only use deb-based distros, or I only used RPM-based distros. So brought with it its own issues. Now, having said all that, none of this, the introduction of package managers and package formats, means that compiling from source has gone. You can still compile from source. Bottom line is, though, very few of us do these days. So the situation we're in now is we have package formats, we have low-level package management tools to manage those packages, and we have a range of higher-level tools that link into the lower-level tools to make life easier for us. So they could be command line tools, such as straightforward apt, or they could be some graphical package manager which then links into apt, which links into dpkg, and I'm thinking here of Synaptic. Or in fact, what seems to be emerging at the moment is the click and install online store, the shop. So there's quite a bit of complexity underneath these days what appears to be a very simple process. And you do not need to know all of this by any stretch of the imagination. If you're not technically inclined, you can just install a distro, go to the software store, click the button to install, and you're done. Click the button to uninstall, and you're done. Wait for your update manager to launch and click OK. And it can be as simple as that. We've still got the debates, though, around which is best, which is more compatible, and a big issue about choice. Which packages are available in a particular format and in particular distros. So at this point, we have to look at the next stage, where Linux package management has moved on to. Anyone who's been using Linux for the last few years will have heard the terms snaps, flatpaks, and app images. Now, I'm not going to go into the individual details of these three different packaging formats, other than to say they are a distribution independent package format, all of them, that theoretically can swap from distro to distro to distro. They have something in common. What they have in common is, rather than having to go off and find all the dependencies, a snap or a flatpak or an app image is a self-contained package that contains the necessary runtimes or dependencies. And as long as you have the background package, Snapd or Flatpak, that will enable you to install them. Theoretically, you can swap and change on any distro. So it's not just down to Debs and RPMs or Arch packages. You can run Snapd on any of those systems. You can run Flatpaks on any of those systems. And you can run app images on any of those systems. App images are probably a little bit simpler in that they are simply an archive that contains the whole package. You don't install them as such. You just make them executable and double click and off you go, and it's a self-mounting package. They're less popular probably at the moment than Flatpaks and Snaps. Snaps has been associated with Ubuntu because it's Canonical who developed them, and they are only available for systems that use Systemd. Flatpaks don't depend on Systemd, so they can be used more widely. But ultimately, most systems have Systemd these days, rightly or wrongly. That's a debate in itself. There's another level of choice in here. Are these distribution-independent packages the future of Linux? Or will we still stay with Debs and RPMs, etc., etc.? Well, we're at a stage at the moment where you can choose. You can choose what you do. There are a whole range of criticisms about should you install a Deb or a Snap or a Flatpak. The self-contained packages tend to be larger than the Deb and Red Hat formats, but that's because they contain all the dependencies. They don't necessarily integrate as well into the desktop as your standard package formats, although that's changing. And they're not always quite as fast. And issues around security have also been raised about whether or not they are as secure as a package that is just in the standard format and it's installed from the online repo associated with that distro. So we're at the stage now where, in one way, package management in Linux has become incredibly simple. It is a point-and-click affair. So for the new Windows user coming over, they really have to wrap their heads around, do I really just have to open this store, click the button, and that's it, it's installed? And the answer in the majority of cases is yes, that's all you have to do. But choice has now become difficult. We not only have the traditional file formats out there, we also have a range of higher level package managers that link into those, or the lower level package managers. So Debs and DPKG and Synaptic or a software store, etc., etc. We also have the choice between Snaps, Flatpaks, and ISO images. Now, choice is a great thing, but it doesn't always help the Linux cause. At the beginning of this video, I referred to the concepts of freedom and choice. And I think that's where we really need to end the video as well. Because everything to do with Linux is about freedom. Freedom to access the software, freedom to access the source code. And in itself, that freedom gives us the choice. We can go and get the source code and do our own thing with it. Compile our own tools, modify it, do what we want. So having the freedom to do that has left us with a situation where we have multiple choices. Now, for many of us who've used Linux for a lot of years, myself included here, I really value that. I value having the choice to pick whatever distro I want and to choose my window manager or my desktop environment and to choose the package management system that I prefer. There is a downside, though. And Alan Pope mentioned, one of the developers of Ubuntu, mentioned in an interview last month, when he was asked the question, how do we kind of cut through the complexity of choice for new users? How do we help them navigate so that they know which distro to download? Because if they go on the likes of DistroWatch, it's just a world of confusion. And he said, just recommend Ubuntu. Get them to install Ubuntu, which was a fairly contentious statement to make, and it got many people's backs up initially. But even DT a few weeks ago made a video and he said, yeah, essentially he came down on the same thing. And I've said something similar. It creates a bit of a contradiction, though, that. It creates a contradiction where if we're going to resolve the problem of choice, what we have to do is restrict people's freedoms. How does that work? I really don't know. I understand that if people go out there and are new to Linux and they want to choose a distro, they first have to wrap their heads around what each distro does, the look and feel of the distro, what packages and tools it contains by default, how they manage the distro, what window manager or desktop environment they're going to use. To be honest, overwhelmed by choice is something that can very easily happen within Linux, and I'm not surprised that we're still only at 2 or 3%. Windows has a single package management system, broadly, as does Mac, and they just push that and they minimize confusion. Now, the question for me is, do we do something similar and try and minimize confusion by just, going the route of recommending a single distro to new users, and more widely than that, get rid of this massive package managers that we have and just settle on the one? I'm torn between the two, and I have to say, for me personally, I like the choice. I would be really annoyed to see that we're just now using Flatpacks and we're just using one distro with perhaps a choice of 2 desktop environments. So that's the whole thing about freedom and choice. Choice is a great thing, but with choice comes responsibility. And the main responsibility is the responsibility to choose for yourself. And not everybody is comfortable with that. What's the answer? I really don't know, but I think it's going to be interesting watching how Linux continues to develop over the coming decade. And if it's been anything like the rapid development that's happened over the last 15, 16 years, wow, I can't wait to find out what happens. That's it for today, guys. Have a great weekend. Don't forget to join me on Library and come and join us on the OldTechBloke Facebook group. Stay well, everyone.